this coming weekend, Derrick Lewis and Jailton Almeida will be facing off in the main event of UFC Fight Night 231. UFC Fight Night, Almeida versus Lewis, going down in Sao Paulo, Brazil, this Saturday night, November 4th. Here we go. Before we talk about how many are we going to talk about? About 8 or so, 7 or 8?
I think it's 8
from this card. Are there any other fights
8.
or fighters that you guys want to quickly spotlight for our listeners and viewers and be like, this guy, make sure you watch this fight? Mark? Omar? Mark?
Honestly, dude, you got to just watch the whole card. The card is actually pretty solid, all things considered, from top to bottom. There's some really good matchups on here from a stylistic standpoint. I mean, I'll let Mark run through a lot of them because there's really a lot of good ones. Montserrat Ruiz
Go ahead.
on here.
I'm just going to say a couple.
Conejo's on here. She's kind of a hit or miss, but the one thing I will say about Conejo, she's generally always there to scrap. Mark DeCasey, again, always there to scrap. A little bit more of a wrestler than he has been a striker, but we'll see how he kicks off the night. Angela Hill is there. Beast, always.
We're doing Angela Hill's fight.
Oh, correct, right. She's just so low on the list, which seems fucking ridiculous to me, but we're not, I feel like every week we're complaining about people and their place on the on the fight card. Modestas Bukowskis is on here. Dana Marcos is on here. Elves Brenner. If you don't know who Elves Brenner is, you might want to educate yourself. That dude had a really good debut. Very, very interested to see where he goes now that he's gotten what I would imagine is a full camp. So, yeah, a lot of good fights, man, from top to bottom. Definitely recommend watching.
Yeah, I agree. The girl who's debuting against Conejo is Eduarda Moura, who is undefeated and really good grappler. So she's somebody to keep an eye on if she can get a debut win there. And then the dude who is Daniel Marcos, who Omar mentioned, he is the one that beat Davy Grant in his debut or in his second fight, I believe it was, which was fairly controversial. But either way, I had a very close fight with Davy Grant, who's obviously very good. But he's fighting a guy named Victor Hugo, who I've kind of been educating myself on a little bit. I didn't know him prior to looking into this card. But I don't want to call him a journeyman, but like a veteran who has been around a lot of promotions, been fighting for a while, but hasn't lost in years and years and years. Finisher, can tap you, can knock you out. Seems like one of these guys, almost like a Victor Henry type, who like finally made it to the UFC, and you might realize like should have been here for quite a while already. So I'm interested to see that fight between Hugo and Marcos. That could be a fun fight. And the Petrino Bukowskis one is a good one. Petrino's obviously looked like a stud so far. So yeah, a lot of solid fights, even the ones we're not going to fully go through here.
All right, boys, let us kick off our discussion. In the women's strawweight division, Angela Hill taking on Denise Gomes. I hope I'm saying that name right. I know she's Brasileira. Angela Hill, Overkill. Angie Hill, the 38-year-old from San Diego, California. Her pro record stands at 15-3 with 5 knockouts, and she's very much looking to get back to her winning ways after a decision loss to the star, Mackenzie Dern. She'll be standing across from Denise Gomes, the 23-year-old out of Brazil, 8-2 as a pro thus far with 6 knockouts on her record. Back-to-back wins coming into this weekend. After winning on Contender Series, she lost her official UFC debut, but now has won back-to-back fights coming into this Saturday night. Mark, go first. Give us your take and your pick of Angela Hill versus Denise Gomes.
All right, so close odds here. Angela Hill is barely an underdog, but she is plus 105. And Denise Gomes, despite being the more unproven fighter of the two, is favored. She's minus 125. There is 1 inch of height and 1.5 inches of reach on the Angela Hill side of things. I actually thought it was going to be more than that in height. I feel like Gomes is not tall in my head, but I guess Angie's not quite as tall as I'm imagining. But yeah, it's a close fight. Gomes has looked really solid thus far. She, of course, finished Omar's girl in Yasmin Hauregui. But Angela Hill is a different type of test. Obviously, Hauregui is very talented, but we have seen Angela Hill in there with top flight girls for years and years at this point. I don't know that I've seen enough from Denise Gomes to be picking her over a girl like Hill. I get why she's favored, at least in a way. I get why she's favored. But, Angie's won arguable decisions over girls who are like top 5 level. So I'm going to go with her. She's very hard to hurt. We've seen that over the years. No one really gets Angela out of there with strikes. And I'm going to trust her more, even if she does get cracked a couple times, to be the one to navigate this fight, to lean on her advantages, to dictate the action more so, to not allow Gomes to get going with anything that's big momentum, and to take at least 2 of these rounds. So I will say Angela Hill, UD.
Okay, Omar, your take and pick for Hill versus Gomes.
I think we've always made ourselves pretty clear that we are generally an Angela Hill-esque podcast here. And we generally pick Angela Hill. However, Denise Gomes fucked up my girl. So I feel like I can't really pick against her, at least for this specific next fight afterwards. I need to be on the Denise Gomes train here. I do think it's very difficult to take Angela Hill out. I do think Angela Hill has so much more experience, obviously, in the cage that will work to her favor. However, Denise Gomes is powerful, man. And Angela Hill, while she's a scrapper, has never really done well taking power shots. And I think Denise Gomes is going to be riding that power train. So I'm going to go with Denise Gomes here. I don't know if she gets her out of there, but I do think that she's able to take 2 out of the 3 rounds. So Denise Gomes, unanimous decision. Don't sleep on a potential TKO, though. The girl's got really heavy hands.
Yeah, Angela Hill is technically old enough to be Denise Gomes' mother, about 16 or 17 years older than Gomes here. Angela Hill, 38 years old. Gomes.
It's a little wild, Mark.
Excuse me?
16, 17. I mean, that's wild.
Could be.
That's wild.
What's wild? What do you mean?
Just like, I guess she could have had her at 16 and still been her mother. I don't know if I would.
I mean, biologically old enough to be. No?
I guess it's so.
I don't mean it to be insulting at all.
No,
I just mean it to drive home the point of their difference in age. Denise Gomes, 23 years old. Angela Hill, 38. You guys know that I love Angela Hill myself. This is not a spot in which I'm going to be picking her. Mark makes a great point. Angela Hill is not one that usually gets finished with strikes. I don't think Denise Gomes is going to finish her with strikes, but I do see her perhaps having Angie Hill in trouble once or twice throughout this fight and coming away with, let's say, a 29-28 scorecard in favor of Gomes. Give me Gomes by UD.
Oh, wait, I'm not tracking our picks the way I usually do. You both took Gomes, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okie doke. Got it going now.
Okay, next up, we go to the welterweight division with Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos taking on Rinat Fakhretdinov. This is a fight that I cannot wait to watch. So Dos Santos, whose nickname is Capoeira, love that nickname because Capoeira's fucking cool. The 36-year-old out of Brazil, he's 24-7 as a pro with 17 finishes, 14 of them being knockouts or TKOs. He's riding back-to-back wins coming into this weekend. Most recently, a split decision win over Abubakar Nurmagomedov back in June of this year. He'll be standing across from another very, very talented Russian in Rinat Gladiator Fakhretdinov, the 32-year-old out of Moscow, Russia. His record stands at 21-1 with 17 finishes, 11 of those being knockouts. He has not lost a fight since his second pro fight back in June of 2013. So we're talking the man has not lost a fight in a literal decade. Okay, Omar, start us off this time. Give us your take and your pick. Fakhretdinov versus Zaleski dos Santos.
I gotta say, man, this is one of those really, really good fights that I'm super interested in. Both guys are very, very talented. Zaleski dos Santos is a very talented striker. The thing that I think is going to sending me over the edge, one over the other, is Rinat's performance against Kevin Lee and against Brian Battle for that matter. So regardless of the level that you might consider Brian Battle at, or even Kevin Lee in his later stage of his career, the performances themselves from Rinat were pretty spectacular. He completely dominated Brian Battle, and, Brian Battle, for all the unorthodox things he's done or does in the cage, doesn't really lose. And it's not, he doesn't really get dominated like that. He doesn't really get bell-to-bell worked. And he did by Rinat in pretty aggressive fashion. And Kevin Lee, he just completely ruined in that fight. So the performances themselves to me speak a little bit more to what I expect to happen more than the fact that that Dos Santos has been in there for probably 2, maybe 3 times the amount of cage experience than Fakhretdinov has. But I don't think it'll matter, man. I think Fakhretdinov is going to come, and I think he's going to eat. So I'm going to go with Fakhretdinov here by submission, round 3.
Mark, you're up.
He's a pretty big favorite, so it shows you how high people are on Fakhretdinov. He is minus 370, and Zaleski is plus 280 as the dog. Nearly the same size, 1 inch of height, 1 inch of reach for Rinat. I love Zaleski Dos Santos. You guys know this. I truly think with different matchups, a little bit different timing, and maybe more of a push behind him, that he could have been a top-level talent and been having some big fights by this point in his career. I think that he's good everywhere, but he is now 36, and he is fighting Rinat Fakhretdinov. And from what I've seen from Rinat thus far, I don't know that I'm ready to pick anyone, not even a guy that I love, to beat him. So I'm not going to do it. I do think it's interesting because Zaleski is dangerous in a lot of places, and if he could ever stop Rinat from being able to fight his fight, I think this could get really interesting real quick. And we've seen him nullify the wrestling of guys like Abubakar and Benoit Saint-Denis, who he destroyed. Granted, Saint-Denis is a weight class down now. So we know it's possible, but I'm just inclined to believe that the wrestling of Rinat is a cut above these guys. And I have to say that he gets this done. So he'll have to earn it, but I'm going to say Rinat UD.
Yeah, we are definitely in agreement here. Piggybacking off something you said, Mark, I'm not ready to pick against Rinat Fakhretdinov until he is facing probably ranked, top 15 ranked opponents. That would kind of give me pause. At this point, I think he's just going to keep marching up into the rankings. I'm just curious, Mark, how close is he to the top 15 in your rankings?
Rinat, you said?
Is he knocking on the door? Yeah.
Sorry, I was getting a text that I was reading.
Okay.
I don't have my rankings open, so here. Oh, they open super fast. Rinat is 24.
Okay. Just curious, where is Dos Santos for you?
34.
Okay. All right. Yeah, give me Fakhretdinov by UD. I too am a fan of Zaleski Dos Santos. I think he's a super talented welterweight, but ain't gonna get it done over Fakhretdinov, man. I don't know who is at this point in this stage of his career. Let's go on now to the lightweight division. Ismael Bonfim taking on Vinc from Hell Pichel. Bonfim, the 27-year-old out of Brazil, 19-4 as a pro with 13 finishes, 9 of them knockouts. Looking to get back in the win column after Benoit Saint-Denis handed him a surprising submission loss back in July of this year, putting a momentary halt to the Ismael Bonfim hype train coming into the UFC. So he's now, after winning on Contender Series, he's now 1-1 in the UFC after finishing Terrence McKinney with a flying knee in the second round back in January of this year. Let's see, Vinc from Hell Pichel, the 40-year-old out of California, 14-3 as a professional with 8 finishes. Also looking to get back in the win column after dropping a decision to Mark Madsen back in April. I will go first, gentlemen. This is a matchup for me that I think is made to be an exciting one, but one also for Ismael Bonfim to hop right back in the win column. I will take Bonfim. I think he's going to be very motivated, and I think he finishes Vinc Pichel, handing him his second TKO loss. And I will say it's going to come in the second round. Mark, why don't you go first, or second now?
Okay, Bonfim is a big favorite despite coming off the loss. He's minus 520. Vinc Pichel is plus 380 as the dog. 2 inches of height and 1 inch of reach for Vinc Pichel. And, yeah, he's never an easy night. He's no walkover for Ismael to bounce back against after his loss to Benoit Saint-Denis. But I do think Bonfim gets him. I don't think Pichel is a good enough wrestler to have enough success there against Bonfim, which means he's going to end up in exchanges on the feet. And Bonfim is quicker there. He's more dangerous there. He hits harder, and I think he clips Pichel at some point. So I am going to go Ismael Bonfim, round 2, knockout.
Okay, Omar.
I love this fight for Bonfim. A little terrified of this fight for Pichel. Like Mark said, Pichel is definitely not an easy out, but there is something very crisp about Bonfim striking. And, the fight with Marco Madsen was one that was heavily dominated by the wrestling. And I'm sorry, that's Pichel, not Bonfim. Benoit Saint-Denis, wrong wrestler. Was definitely dominated by the wrestling still, and obviously he ended up putting himself into a pretty bad position that allowed him to get choked out. Like Mark kind of alluded to, I don't think Vinc Pichel kind of has that ability, or won't have that ability, at least not against him. And I think he kind of gets pieced up here, man. I don't think it's going to be very easy. I don't think it happens early, but I do think it happens, and I do think he gets finished. So I think I'm on the same train as Mike here. I'm going to go with Bonfim by TKO here at probably the end of round 2.
Okay. Love Pichel's nickname, gotta say. What a fun, creative nickname from hell. Okay, going to now the middleweight division. Rodolfo Vieira taking on Armen Petrosyan. Is it Rodolfo?
Yeah.
Or
Yes.
Rodolfo?
Rodolfo.
It's Rodolfo.
Rodolfo.
Let's see. So Vieira, the black belt hunter, the 34-year-old out of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. His record stands at 9-2 with 8 of his 9 victories coming by way of submission, earning that nickname each and every time he steps into a cage. He's 4-2 thus far in the UFC, most recently submitting Cody Brundage back in April of this year. His only 2 losses in the UFC middleweight division came at the hands of Anthony Hernandez and Chris Curtis. Armen Petrosyan, the 32-year-old out of Armenia, 9-2 as a pro with 6 finishes. All 6 of those are knockouts. Coming off back-to-back wins in the UFC over AJ Dobson and Christian Leroy Duncan, both decision wins. The win over Duncan came in June of this year, and now he's stepping back in the cage against Rodolfo Vieira. Omar, give us your take and your pick.
I really like Armen Petrosyan here, man. I think Rodolfo Vieira has obviously the jiu-jitsu pedigree, but Armen Petrosyan is not a guy that's very easy to take down. And at the same time, his striking is really, really crisp. And Vieira has already shown kind of very similar things where when he gets hit, doesn't really like it all too much. And Petrosyan is one of those guys that's going to piece you up if you give him the opportunity to. So I do think Petrosyan is going to come out on top here. I wouldn't be surprised if, there's some kind of grappling nonsense that Vieira is able to capitalize on, but I don't see that happening very quickly or even really at all personally. So I'm going to go with Petrosyan here. I don't think it's a finish, but I do think it's a unanimous decision.
I'll go next. I like the Brazilian here. I think Petrosyan has never been submitted, but he's not a submission artist himself, and I think that the black belt hunter is going to claim another scalp here. Give me Vieira by submission, I'll say, in the third round. Mark?
Dead even fight, odds-wise, as people may not be shocked to hear after hearing you two being split on it. But both guys are minus 110 on the odds. 3 inches of height for Petrosyan, but 2 inches of reach for Vieira. Really interesting fight to me. Both are big, strong dudes. Obviously, it's a big style clash. The question is just who you think can implement it. If Petrosyan can stop the takedowns, he wins. If Vieira can force himself inside the strikes of Petrosyan and manage to drag him down, he wins. Because as long as this fight is in the striking, it's going to favor Petrosyan significantly. And if it hits the mat, it is going to be all Vieira. So it's a tough call. I think Vieira gets somewhat underrated because of a couple shaky performances he's had, but he can be very on at times as well. But I'm going to use the Caio Borralho fight as kind of the barometer here. And if Petrosyan could do as well as he did in that fight, then I don't think there's any reason he can't replicate that in this one or possibly do even better. So I'm going to say he can nullify enough, keep himself safe enough, lean on the striking, obviously, and win a UD.
Okay. All right, we go to the middleweight division, Caio Borralho versus Abus Magomedov. So Borralho is the 30-year-old out of Brazil. His record stands at 14-1 with 1 no contest. 8 of his 14 wins coming by way of finish, 4 knockouts and 4 subs. He has not lost a fight. Similar to Rinat Fakhretdinov, he has not lost a fight since his second pro fight, which was back in 2015. He won back-to-back fights on the Contender Series in 2021 and is now 4-0 under the UFC banner. Most recently, finishing by a rear naked choke, Mikhail Oleszejczuk back in April of this year. He'll be standing across from Abus Magomedov, the 33-year-old out of Russia. His record stands at 25-5 with 1 draw. 20 of his 25 wins have come by way of finish, 14 of those being knockouts. Most recently, after busting into the UFC, finishing Dustin how do you say his name? Stoltzfus? Stoltzfus. In 19 seconds, he got matched up with Sean Strickland, maybe a bit too early. I was super high on Abus from seeing what I saw out of him in that opening bout. But Strickland put a stop to that one and made me look real bad with that pick. And he's looking to get back to his winning ways and finishing ways over the very tough, also rising prospect in Caio Borralho. Mark, start us off this time with the odds, and then you can give us your take and your pick.
All right, the odds. Caio Borralho is a decent favorite. He's minus 290. Abus Magomedov is plus 220 as the dog. He being Abus, is 1 inch taller and has a 3-inch reach advantage. He's still incredibly hard to evaluate. Like, just because he got stopped by Sean Strickland, who is now the champ, does not mean that he's not a very good fighter. But, man, I've believed in Caio Borralho this whole time, and I'm just having an easier time siding with him than I am siding with Abus. And I may very well be wrong because the striking probably does go to Abus here, and if his wrestling can keep him out of bad positions on the mat, which it very well could, it's not like Borralho is so dominant at getting positions, then how does Caio win the fight? But I'm still going to go Caio. I think he can hang well enough on the feet. He's shown that before against guys like Petrosyan, who I just mentioned. Maybe be losing, but find an opening as this fight goes on. Maybe expose some cardio by forcing Abus to defensively wrestle. We know his cardio has been suspect before, and find an opening to finish this fight. So I'm going to say Caio does it late, round 3 sub.
Omar, you're up.
Caio reminds me of like a Brazilian Johnny Cage, doesn't he? Dude,
yes, you're so right.
Like if Mortal Kombat.
I'm looking at his photo on SureDog right now.
Yeah.
It looks just like Johnny Cage.
It's exactly who he reminds me of. And he kind of fights a little crazy
right.
too. I think it's a great matchup, to be honest. This is another great fight on this card. Both guys, I think, have very similar avenues of beating each other to hell. I think Borralho, though, has, we've seen him run into a little bit of trouble, but we've also seen him still persevere and come back and still win 2 out of the 3 rounds. I think this is going to be very similar to it. I don't think we're going to see Abus get his ass whooped the way that he did against Sean Strickland, but I do think that it's very possible that Borralho is going to be the stronger guy in there, and I think if we do get 2 clinch exchanges, I think Borralho has a good chance of being able to come out on top of them. So I'm going to go Borralho here. I don't think he finishes Abus. I think Abus is kind of a beast and very durable, all things considered with that Sean Strickland fight. But I'm going to go Borralho here by unanimous decision.
Dude, I'll be honest. I was high on Abus, man. I was real high. And I'm a little hurt. I was a little burned by that Strickland fight. So I will not be picking Abus here. No, but no. He's got to earn my trust back. But I think that Borralho is a super talented middleweight and really a rising star in the division. So the thing from the Strickland fight that I thought was the most, I guess, eye-opening and was sort of new information, because Abus has a lot of firepower at middleweight. But I think what Strickland exposed to a certain extent was that he didn't have the best gas tank for 185 pounds. So I think that Borralho, who's a very different fighter from Sean Strickland, but I think that he's going to take advantage of that gas tank issue for Abus. And I think Mark, you made a similar pick. I think he is going to drag him into deeper waters later in the fight. I'll take a 3rd round finish as well for Caio Borralho. I'll say TKO. I think you said sub.
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Here we go. Up to the heavyweights. Rodrigo Nascimento taking on Don'Tale Mayes. So, Nascimento, Yogi Bear is his nickname, is the 30-year-old out of Brazil, 10-1 with 1 no contest, with 8 finishes on his record, 6 of those submissions. Let's see. After winning on Contender Series, he is now 3-1 with 1 no contest in the UFC. Most recently, a split decision win over Ilir Latifi back in May of this year. Don'Tale Mayes, Lord Kong, the 31-year-old out of Louisville, Kentucky. As a pro, he is 10-5 with 1 no contest, 7 finishes, 6 of them knockouts. His last fight was a knockout victory over the veteran Andrei Arlovsky. All right. Omar, start us off. Give us your take and your pick between these 2 big boys, Nascimento and Mayes.
You're muted.
Yeah, sorry. We should be pointing out that this is actually a rematch. Nascimento and Don'Tale Mayes have actually fought once back in 2020, right at the the beginning of the pandemic in May of 2020, when things were just starting to get going from the UFC from the pandemic issues. And things didn't go well for Don'Tale Mayes. He got taken down and he got choked out. I can't imagine that there is going to be anything different about this fight, personally. I don't know anything about Don'Tale Mayes' last few performances that would make me think that he could stop Nascimento from doing relatively the same thing that happened in the first fight. With that being said, I'm going with Nascimento here, round 2, submission.
Mark?
So Nascimento's the favorite. He's minus 190. Mayes is plus 155. 4 inches of height and 1 inch of reach for Don'Tale Mayes. I'll be honest, I didn't even realize this was a rematch until I started looking into it. I completely forgot they even fought before. Probably because neither guy has had too memorable of a UFC career to this point, so that fight just didn't stick in my head. But I really forgot they even fought. And I think the UFC might have forgotten too, because why make this rematch? Like, why did it need to happen right now? I feel like there were fresher opponents that could have made sense. It's a very random rematch. Mm-hmm. But with that said, like Omar said in the first one, Nascimento was able to drag Mayes down and sub him. And also, like Omar said, I don't really have any reason to think that is going to change. Like, all right, Mays has been figuring out his game a little bit more. We know he does carry power. He's very big. But I don't think any of that prevents him from getting taken down and getting tapped again at some point in this fight. So I will say Rodrigo Nascimento round 3 sub.
Not to mention really quick that Mays hasn't really even fought anybody that's tried to even implement a similar game plan as Nascimento. So it's not even like you can say, since Nascimento's fight, I've seen his takedown defense get this much better.
Right.
Or I've seen his submission defense get this much better. He's just fought a bunch of guys that have just stood and banged with him, and even then, he's sort of not done crazily amazing, you know?
Agreed. Yeah, we are agreed. We are unanimous for this one, guys. Kind of an easy pick for me. I think Nascimento also takes him down again. I don't think that I've seen this vast improvement in Dontel Mays' ground game. So I'm going to say Nascimento finds a way at some point in this fight, as long as he avoids something like a huge shot from Mays, gets Mays to the ground, goes to work. I'll take late round 1 submission for Nascimento.
We've been unanimous on every fight except one. And I don't think that's going to change on these last 2.
Okay.
Can't imagine it would.
All right, co-main events between Gabriel Bonfim and Nicolas Dalby. So Bonfim, the brother of the other Bonfim, who we talked about 20 minutes ago, is 26 years old, also out of Brazil, undefeated, 15-0. All 15 wins are finishes. Not one of his fights has gone to the scorecards. He is now 2-0 in the UFC after winning on Contender Series, and he will be standing across from Nicolas Dalby, Danish Dynamite, baby. His record, nothing to scoff at. 22-4 with 1 draw and 1 no contest. 10 of his wins have been finishes, 6 of those knockouts, and he's riding a 3-fight win streak coming into this weekend. Most recently, a decision victory over Muslim Salikov back in June of this year. Mark, give me the odds, your take, and your pick.
They are wide. Is this the widest favorite we have said thus far? Yep, it is. I don't know if anyone on the undercard is even bigger. But Gabriel Bonfim might be the biggest on the card, and he is minus 620. Nicolas Dalby is plus 440. 2 inches of height for Gabriel, but 2.5 inches of reach for Dalby, actually. Another fight on this card for me, like the Zaleski fight earlier, where a guy that I love to pick in Nicolas Dalby is fighting a dude who might just be a monster in Gabriel Bonfim.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, Dalby has shown time and time again how much trouble he can give to different fighters. I mean, he drew with Darren Till when Till was looking dominant in his earlier run. We've seen the way he can put it on guys late in fights. But I got to go Bonfim. Just on the face of it, he should be faster. He should be completely fine in the striking. He should have an advantage in the grappling. If this does make it late, it's not like, Bonfim gets a lot of finishes, as Mike said. If this does go late, who knows if Dalby can do Dalby things and make some crazy shit happen. But I don't think I'm going to pick that it gets that far. I'm going to trust Gabriel Bonfim's talent that we've seen thus far, and I'm going to say he takes yet another neck, and I will say he finishes this by submission in round 2.
Oh, baby. Yeah, I'll go next. I'm not going to pick against a guy who's 15-0 with 15 finishes. It would be
there's 0 decisions? I didn't even realize that's what you said.
0 decisions. None of his 15 wins has gone to the scorecards.
Wow.
3 KOs and 12 submission victories. He's never been beaten.
How many times has he been to a third round?
Let's look.
Twice.
Let's see. 1, 2. A bunch of second round finishes and 2 third round finishes and a bunch of first round finishes.
A bunch of first round finishes.
His win on Contender Series was first round, and both of his UFC wins have been first-round finishes. His first, and both of them, he looks like, I'll just quickly say, he has averaged about 60 seconds in the UFC octagon.
The problem
Thus
is
far.
these guys keep going in for takedowns against these Bonfim brothers, thinking that nothing is going to happen to them. They keep putting them up against the cage. They keep putting their necks to one side and just leaving them exposed. And it just seems like Bonfim is the kind of guy that doesn't need more than a split second to get his arm under that neck, man. And once you give it to him, he's not letting go. And we've seen a lot of guys go for crazy guillotines off of takedowns and end up getting fucked up and getting stuck on bottom and not working out for them. Bonfim looks like he's got the type of guillotine that when it's in, it's in.
Yeah. That being said, I'm pleased to see this matchup. I think it's nice matchmaking. I think Dalby's a worthy opponent.
Oh, I agree.
To give this Bonfim brother a little heat check at this point in his rising career.
Yeah.
I
All right, let's go.
I was gonna say really quick.
Wait, so what were your guys'
I think
picks? Did you make them?
I did Bonfim
Yeah.
by submission.
Oh, you went first, Omar?
Oh no, I didn't go first.
No, you didn't. Yeah.
Did you not go yet?
I don't think.
I
don't
think I went second.
I don't. But Mike, I don't think you said how it finished either. I don't think either one of you did.
Oh, I think you're right. Second round submission for Bonfim.
And Omar, you said first.
No, I'm going with second round submission as well. I think Dalby.
Oh,
What'd
so
you
we
say,
all
Mark?
said the same
Yeah,
thing.
because
We all said second round.
my big thing about this fight is you're basically taking one of the, at this point, one of the most dangerous finishers and putting him up against a guy who's probably one of the most durable fighters that you could pick in that division. So it makes for a very, very interesting matchup and doesn't really leave a lot of room to figure out exactly what's going to happen in this fight, or at the very least how it's going to end. A decision is very possible at this point in Bonfim's career, the more he moves up that ladder. So it's very, very interesting.
Sure is. Okay, boys. Main event time. UFC Fight Night. Almeida versus Lewis. Headlined by Jailton Almeida, stepping up in probably what is the biggest fight of his career, taking on Derrick, the Black Beast Lewis. Here we go. Let us set this up. The A side is Jailton Almeida, Maladinho, the 32-year-old out of Bahia, Brazil. His pro record stands at 19-2 coming into this weekend, with 19 of his wins. All 19 of his wins. Again, similar to Bonfim, have been finishes. 7 of them knockouts, 12 of them submissions. He's only lost twice, 1 decision, and he has been knocked out once, very early in his career, in what was only the 5th fight of his career for a promotion called Katana Fight. It was in 2017. He got knocked out in the first round at the 16-second mark, so he got caught, guys. He's dropped one other decision back in 2018 in a promotion called Chuto Brazil, but he's been on a tear since. He's undefeated in the UFC. He's now 5-0 under the UFC banner after winning on Contender Series. He'll be standing across from the UFC heavyweight knockout king in Derrick the Black Beast Lewis, the 38-year-old out of Houston, Texas, USA. His pro record stands at 27-11 with 1 no contest. 22 of his 27 wins have been knockouts. Like I said, he is the heavyweight knockout king. At one point, he was the UFC knockout king, but I believe he has been displaced by one Matt the Immortal Brown. He's coming off of a TKO victory over Marcos Rogerio de Lima, a 33-second first-round finish that started with a flying knee out of the corner from Derrick Lewis. Just incredible stuff. At 38 years old, he's still finding ways to electrify crowds and audiences. All right, Omar, start us off this time. Give us your take and your pick of Jailton Maladinho Almeida stepping up to the biggest fight of his career, taking on the legend, the active living legend in Derrick Lewis.
It's very interesting, and I think one of the big things that may not be getting talked about enough is the fact that Derrick Lewis is stepping into this fight on relatively short notice. I I think obviously, like with almost any Derrick Lewis fight or every Derrick Lewis fight, there's obviously going to be an opportunity for him to put somebody's lights out. Very good with his uppercuts, very good with his strikes in general, but his game is very noticeable, right? There's not a lot of tricks to his game. There's not a lot of crazy things that tend to happen, and I say this full well knowing that he just flying kneed this man in his last fight. But there's something to be said about doing dumb shit and hoping it it works, and then what your actual game is. And I think the game of Derrick Lewis is one that is pretty well known. It's just a game that is very difficult for people to stop, especially when they have relatively limited skill sets. Jailton Almeida, I don't think is that dude. Jailton Almeida might be one of the more well-rounded fighters and one of the most dangerous fighters we've seen on the roster right now. I think his come-up has been very strong. I think his performances have been exceptional almost all the way around. I think the thing that he's missing more than anything at this point is the names that get attached to it. So Rosenstrike, I think, it might have been a good litmus test as to what we're looking at for the end of a Derrick Lewis fight. Derrick Lewis, I think, has better takedown defense than Jairzinho Rosenstrike does, but I think in the end it'll all be for naught anyway. I'm going to go Jailton Almeida by submission, round 2.
I will go next. I agree. I think that this is going to be a sort of passing of the torch fight for the UFC heavyweight division, where Derrick Lewis really, even though he is coming off of a nice TKO victory, he has lost. That snapped a 3-fight losing streak for Derrick Lewis, having lost 4 of his last 6. In 3 of those 4 losses, he got finished himself. And I think this one is going to kind of put a stamp on the case file of Derrick Lewis, where Jailton Almeida is really going to ascend into the upper echelon now of the UFC heavyweight division. The man is just a machine at heavyweight. He was even scarier at 205. But I see him, staying away from Derrick Lewis's power, getting this man to the ground. Once Derrick Lewis is on his back, he can have a few bursts of energy and explode to try to get back to his feet. But I think Almeida is a giant and is also a ground fighting expert, truly. And I see him submitting Derrick Lewis. I will say a first round submission victory for Jailton Almeida. Mark?
Yep, Jailton is a minus 500 favorite here. Wow. Derrick Lewis is plus 370. Maybe it would have been closer without short notice, maybe not. The height is the same, the reach is the same, so you think of Derrick Lewis as like the big black beast, but these boys are the same exact size. Obviously a little more girth on Derrick. Personally, I wish we would have got the original fight here between Almeida and Curtis Blades. I loved that test for Almeida. Obviously, I know Derrick Lewis has beaten Curtis Blades, but I just don't feel like he provides the same challenges because we know what Jailton Almeida wants to do. He is Brazilian Khabib. He wants to take you down, set you up methodically, maul you, and submit you. And against the wrestling of Blades, we would have gotten a lot of questions answered. But Lewis is not really that guy in terms of the wrestling pedigree. Now, granted, on the pluses for Lewis, he is not easy to take down. As you said, he's harder to take down than, say, a Rosenstrike. He is not easy to hold down. Same thing, harder than a guy like that. He is a very large man, and he carries monster knockout power for every second that this fight takes place on the feet. So that is the wild card that he brings that Jailton will have to navigate. But I think he'll do it. I think his type of wrestling where he is not necessarily out at range shooting doubles, risking that counter coming, but instead he's more pushing his way inside, leaning on you, adjusting his weight on you, working for trips. I think that's historically the kind of wrestling that Derrick Lewis struggles more with. And I think Almeida's going to have success with it, and I think he ends up on top of Derrick Lewis or on Lewis's back, depending on how they fall, by the end of this first round. And I don't think he lets Derrick Lewis escape. I will say Jailton Almeida, round 1, sub.